So bird migration is the birds that we ban at Cape Florida are migratory birds, and we most of the songbirds that breed in the northern in North America are migratory. Migration evolved. Most of these species evolved in the tropics, but a lot of species it was evolutionary adaptive for some species to move to the northern habitats that temperate habitats when the during the summer to breed there, because in the tropics there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of different species, there's a lot of different predators, there's a lot of competition. So the evolution, the advantage of moving to northern habitats to breed outweighed the danger of the migratory journey. And so the vast majority of the songbirds that we see, and especially in the Northeast, the Eastern US and Canada, migrate to the tropics for the winter. There are a bunch of short distance migrants too that breed in Canada and the Northern US that come to the Southern US, but most of them are intercontinental migrants. Migration, I've been fascinated with migration for years. I worked on the Gulf Coast in the 90s with Dr. Frank Moore, who was one of the big names in migration ecology, discovered a lot of stuff, he and his students. And I moved here in 2000 and I wanted to start a banding station. It just seemed like Florida is a natural funnel for migration. And it's such a dramatic thing. What these birds are doing is amazing. Now, they navigate. They have like their bush that they like to breed in, their territory, and then they'll have a wintering territory that's small, like the size of your yard, and they'll be separated by thousands of miles. These birds, most of these songbirds migrate at night. They think they migrate at night, partly because the air is calmer, there's less predators like hawks. Also, most of these migrants eat, they need daylight to forage. The birds you see migrating during the day are like swallows that eat on the wing. So you see those during the day migrating. And so they can fly all night and then they spend the day down in the trees eating. They also can cross large bodies of water. But they use multiple ways to navigate. They actually can read the stars in the sun, which amazes me that a bird understands where stars are. I don't. I mean, that's pretty cool. They have, I think they have iron in their heads, so they know where magnetic north is. They can orient. They use topographical landmarks, probably especially when they're homing into their final territory. And then they'll also align themselves against the prevailing wind direction. So they wait for a front to pass, and then they get a tailwind after the front, and they somehow understand where they are in the environment on a geographic scale, and it's pretty amazing. The physiology of migrating birds is amazing. This is, I wish I had a pointer. The slide on the left is right. The bird belly, that's a red-eyed vireo, which is a long-distance migrant. They go all the way down to the Amazon basin. And this picture of the belly, we put a little bit of water on it to spread the feathers apart, but that's a live bird. The skin is translucent. You can see through the skin. And what you're seeing is that long line is the breastbone. The red is the muscle. And then the yellow on the top and the bottom is fat. And these birds can gain about 50% of their body weight in fat. So they become these roly-poly things. And yet there's aerodynamic enough that they could still migrate. It'd be like if you're 150 pounds, you're suddenly 220 pounds, and yet you're still able to migrate. And they burn that fuel. That's their fuel for their flight. Their non-essential organs shrink. Where is that? Which one? There we go. Oh, yeah, here we go. So there's the breastbone, there's the muscle, and there's the fat. Their non-essential organs shrink, their reproductive organs shrink down to nothing. If you're not using it for flight, it shrinks. They have incredibly efficient respiratory and circulatory system. Birds, not song, I don't know how high songbirds get, but they've seen geese flying, like clearing the Himalayas. So they're able to do this incredibly athletic activity with hardly any oxygen air. Even these songbirds fly at thousands of feet. So the athleticism is amazing. And 24 hours flights, 36-hour flights for these small little songbirds is pretty typical. I mean, I've watched on radar, there's birds that leave, birds going to the islands, probably, a lot of them probably just leave North Carolina and fly it in one straight flight. There's some birds called blackpolls that leave from like northeast and they go all the way to South America without stopping. People didn't believe it in the beginning, but now with satellite tracking technology, the most amazing migration I've heard of isn't a songbird. It's a bird a little bit bigger, a whimbrel, not a whimbrel, godwit, that they banded her. They put a satellite tracker on her in Alaska because they're like, where are these things stopping in their fall migration? They winter in New Zealand. This bird flew nonstop from Alaska to New Zealand. It was like 10,000 miles without stopping. And they didn't believe it, except here's their data. Here's their little beep, 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 beep. I don't band enough shorebirds to know what their weight is. They have to be, God, I don't know. Probably. Yeah. But I imagine they do the same thing that songbirds do, where they just put on ridiculous amounts of fat for that fuel. And, in the beginning, they're kind of weighted down. Like when we catch a bird that fat, you can feel they're heavy in the hand. You let them go and they don't go up. They kind of drop and then they catch and then they get airspeed. So I think what happens is as you're burning your fat, you're getting more, probably like an airplane or something, a long distance plane. In the beginning, you're burning more fuel because you're heavier. And then later you get lighter. And then I'm sure birds find like that shorebird probably, I think they find the sweet spot, like this is the right speed to conserve your fuel as long as possible. And so migration routes, birds, this is what the migration looks like on the radar. Each of these blobs is a radar station. And there's a cold front here. This is in September. There's a cold front here, and all these winds are out of the north. So the sky is full of millions of migrating birds, and the radar picks them up as they fly through the beam. And so they're flying across a wide front, but they also, they do have kind of flyways, paths, like the birds we catch are really heavily are going to the islands. We don't have very many birds that winter in Central America that are coming through here. Most of those are going like this way, or they split off before Miami. But you have birds from this whole area coming down the Atlantic, probably between the Appalachians and the coast, or some are jumping off, maybe North Carolina and going straight down. And that's who we're catching here. And what they need is, they call them stopover sites. And there's like 3 levels of stopover sites. The first one is a fire escape, which is literally, there's a bad storm, I just need to land until the storm passes. This is a picture from Maine in spring, and I think 2011. And this whole island, it's hard to see in the back, but this whole island is a lighthouse offshore, I think. It was covered with spring migrants. They're just perched on everything. Like there's a fence in the background and you just see birds lined up on it, like Alfred Hitchcock, except really cool because they're all spring warblers. And so this can happen on your boats. If you're on a boat offshore in the Gulf Stream during migration, you might have birds land on your boat and be like, why is that happening? And then the next level up of stopover site is what we could call a convenience store, which is what Cape Florida is, what your yard can be. And that's a little bit more habitat. Like a fire escape can be anything. It could be, a man-made structure they just need to sit on for a few hours. A convenience store is like, some birds have a rough time and they burn up their fat in bad weather or something, and they need to put on more fat before they move on again. So that's habitat that provides them with insects and fruit for about, a week and a half to put on enough fat to continue on their journey. And Then the full service hotel would be habitat that can either support a lot of migrating birds, but also has wintering birds. That would be like a more extensive forest or something. A convenience store can be like any, a big ficus in any of the parks around town will work as a convenience store. And Billbags, Cape Florida, we chose it as a site partly because of geography. The islands like this, if there's birds out over the ocean, and they encounter trouble, meaning rain, storms coming up out of south especially will do it. They will just bail out on the nearest land. And these areas kind of just geographically, especially in the fall, when the spring it's kind of, all stuff is coming across the ocean will land. In fall, those stuff's kind of traveling. Some birds are going down the coast. So they call those places like migrant traps because of geography, they concentrate migrants. But we also have in this slide here and here, it's so developed in the Miami area that Billbags, Cape Florida State Park, and Crandon are like the only big patches of green space up here. Like further out of the picture, like Maston, South Dade, there's some green. But in this whole area, that's like the best green. So it kind of made sense to put a banding station there. And Billbags Cape Florida State Park was, I think it was probably like most parks here, snatched the last minute out of the jaws of developers. But it was in the 80s, it was all Australian pine, and which are pretty and shady, and they make a nice, when the wind blows through them, they make a pretty sound, but they're ecologically sterile. The needles fall on the ground, they make a thick duff, and there's chemicals or something in it that prevent other plants from growing underneath them. So you get a really kind of one-dimensional habitat. There's no fruit. There's only some insects. So like the structure, birds will move through the structure because it's still a tree, but they don't really stay there. They don't, they can't really fatten up. It's basically only a fire escape. So I was 24 in 1992. There was this big ass hurricane. Andrew, some of you may have heard of him. And the very, very destructive storm, and the very top of the eye, this ring was the most intense weather. And the very top of it brushed. Cape Florida is about right there. And so the very top of it came through and took out that Australian pine forest. The wind and the storm surge flattened the forest. And that gave the park an opportunity, because if you have trees standing, you go to try to remove them to replace with natives, people fuss because they see you destroying the trees. They don't understand. They go crazy. It's happened in some other parks around the state where they wanted to replace Australian pine. So Cape Florida was able to use Angie to their advantage. And this is in 1993. They scraped it pretty much clean and started over. And the first thing they did with bulldozers, they restored topography. And, everybody knows Florida topography is like from here to here, but it has a lot of impact on vegetation. And so they kind of made some high and low spots. They also dug out some complicated like creeks and stuff for a mangrove section of the park. And then they planted palms, trees, and shrubs by hand. And Liz Golden, who's given this talk before, she's a park biologist. She started in 1994. She had a lot to do with this whole thing. And they had kind of a historical list of what plants were there historically. And it's missing some strange things, like there weren't live oaks out there that anybody knows of. So we never planted live oaks, even though they're a great bird tree and they're native. But it was a combination of what was on the historical list before the Australian pine and what was available at the time in native plant nurseries. And they got as many plants as they could, and they by hand planted all of everything. And they recreated by hand native habitat. And here's it in 2016. it's, you can see there's a lot more color. There's just a lot more just niches. And up here was where they did they kind of put some creeks and stuff and made it complicated. And there's like a low area that gets fresh water, and a little bit higher area with the hammock and the dune line and everything. So they did a really good job of making, a man-made natural environment. And that's a quick reminder of what it used to look like, how it was just one species and flat. So you build it and they will come. This is a picture of the wood, where our banding area now, and you see there's got low shrubs, tall shrubs, different species, different kinds of fruit, different kinds of bugs, niches, nooks and crannies for birds. And you build it and they will come. And here's birds that we've seen. Some of them are banded that we've seen bopping around the site. And it's both insects and fruit. Both are pretty important. So I show up. I moved here in 2000, and then from when I got here, even when I visited in the 90s, I'm like, we need a banding station here. That'd be so cool. And so I show up in 2000 and met the right people by 2001, started planning the station. I remember coming out here after Hurricane Michelle in November 2001. It was like, awesome hurricane. Didn't kill a whole lot of people. I bugged off work and went birding. And I remember being out there and seeing black-throated blues all over Cape Flora, going, this would be a great place to put the banding station. I met Liz Golden and also met Robin Diaz, who lived on Key Biscayne, and both of them were very integral to us starting the station. I started with a tarp held up by a couple extra poles, a table, 10 nets, and I was doing all the banding. But there's always, people are interested in what I was doing, just kind of watching me. And it took a long time to get the permits. You guys probably know the first time you're getting permits takes forever. I needed federal permits, master banding permit from the banding lab. So I had 2 people I'd already banded with vouch for me. I had 10 years of experience banding for other people, so that helped a lot. I probably banded, 20,000 birds or something by that time. So that helped me get my permit. Also, there weren't a whole lot of people with permits down here. So they're like, oh, cool, we'll give you one. And in the state, a general blanket statewide permit. And then every park you're in, you need to get a permit for that park. So if I'm working in Everglades, I have to get if there's a federal park system. Cape Florida is a state park. So I had to go through their hierarchy. And it's one of those things where they're good for a couple of years. The bigger ones are good for several years. The park one have to renew every year, but once you get it, it's really easy to renew them. But that took me till October 2002 to finally get to where I had all my permits and we could open nets. So we technically started, our calendar 20th anniversary will be like next October 5th of 2022. But I have 20 years of data. And how we catch the birds. These mist nets are very fine, fine threads. It's kind of the concept of a fish net, I guess, but it's much finer. There's a pocket, so the birds get in a pocket, they get a little bit tangled. And we have a loop. I started with 10. We had up to 26 right before Irma. We now have 23. We'll probably go back up to 26 at some point. And they're on a loop, and we check them every 20 minutes. And the birds get tangled in them, and this is the whole thing. This whole extracting part, it takes a lot of training. That's why we don't have people to show up and visit and take the birds out of nets. We have the nets hidden so people that don't know what's going on don't stumble across them and try to take the birds out themselves without knowing anything. This is the hard part. This is why people basically apprentice with this. They commit to like at least 1 day a week for a whole season, because that's, especially if you have low volume, it takes a while to learn all the different wraps, how to safely extract the birds. But they're gently removed from the nets. Each bird gets its own bag, and they're calm when they're in the bag. And then we bring them back to the banding station. We have that central tent. That's a pretty busy day, and Miriam and Mario are just pretty happy about it. And they're safe in the bags You know, they get processed. They might have to be in the bag an hour if it's busy, but they're safe there because there's the biggest problem is you have like feral cats and raccoons in the habitat, and so you, you get them out in the nets and in the tent, and if they need to wait, they wait there. That's safe. They're out of the sun. Everything's fine, and then you ban them as quickly as possible. And the process is, there's our new tent now. Actually, we're even better than that. And it's like mid-year. First of all, I'm issued aluminum U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service bands that each have a distinct number on them. And they're free from the banding lab when you have a permit, but you do have to report the data to them. And we have different size bands for different size birds. On this thing are like the smallest, like gnatcatchers, all the way up to the gray cap birds, and then anything bigger than that, we could ban all the way up to like a broadwing hawk, white crowned pigeon. Those bands are in another container. And you clamp the band on the leg, and then you determine the species, age, and sex of the bird. And mostly this can be done by plumage, obviously, for what the bird is. You know, look at it. Sexing is either plumage, or some birds are the same plumage, but you can use the size. We measure the length of the wing for the size. Some birds you can sex by that. And then for their age, the age we're looking for is born this summer, born before this summer. We call it hatch year after hatch year. And they retain feathers. When birds are juveniles, the fledglings, they get, you know, they're growing all their feathers all at once, and they're kind of loose, and they're not the same quality as their adult feathers because their body's growing and making these feathers all at the same time. And so they're adequate, but they're usually lightly built, and then the bird will start replacing those feathers pretty quickly. And the adult feathers coming in one at a time are stronger. They have a different color. So you can look for, we call them molt limit, these difference. And this bird, this patch of feathers is brown compared to the green and gray here, the green and gray there. And that lets us know that that's a hatch year painted bunting. It was born and hatched out somewhere this summer. And then here's a common ground dove and heavy molt. Then we record the weight, and before this I didn't have a picture of it. You're also blow through the feathers, like that red ivory I showed you earlier, where you're looking through the skin at the muscle and the fat. We give them a visual fat score and then a visual pectoral muscle score, because birds will, just the stress of migration, they'll burn up some of their muscle as well as their fat. And so it'll give us an index of the condition of the bird. And you combine that with weight and wing chord, and you can kind of do an analysis of, are you getting birds in good condition or bad condition? This is also useful when you have recapture data, like you band a bird and it's skinny, you catch it a week and a half later, you can judge how much, you can both get the actual weight and also visually assess if the bird's been able to recover. And then you let the bird go. The process takes, you know, a minute, 2 minutes maybe, depends. And our results after, from 2002 to 2021, we just closed this weekend, so that number is up to date. In the fall, we banded 34,944 birds of 114 species. Spring, that's 20 falls. In spring, we've only been open 6 springs, so we've caught 6,664 birds of 57 species. South Florida tends to get greater diversity in fall and have a longer migration in the fall. and spring, it's shorter. You pretty much only get birds coming from the islands, but it can be very intense. Some of the highest volume I've seen has been in the spring, where it's like you catch 200 birds in a day and you have like 6 nets open, like ridiculous. This is pretty true of most banding stations. You have a few species that are most of your captures, like red starts, ovenbirds, and black-throated blues are like half of what we, and catbirds, it's like half of what we catch. We have a pretty cool lineup. Our top species, it's like 8 species of warblers. So it's, other banding stations get jealous of us. And banding also gives you information on how long these birds live. Cardinals are resident, they don't go anywhere. And so we band some, and that's our record for old birds so far, is this cardinal that was 12. The cardinal, and the boy is the son of one of our volunteers. Their kids kind of grew up at the banding station. now they're off going to college, and then one of them's going to college. One of them's at Mass. But they're the same age. I thought that was so cool. We haven't seen that bird since. That was 2017, but it was just like, look at that. Actually, I think the bird's a couple months older than Nico. I mean, not Nico, Lucas. We had an 8-year-old gray catbird, 8-year-old ovenbird. Although I think we might have had a 9-year-old ovenbird this year. I got to go through the data. I haven't had a chance to do the recaps yet. 7-year-old American redstart. That's a tiny bird. As you guys know, when you get redstarts, they're tiny, like 7 grams. That's 7 migrations for that little guy. And the other thing we get is recoveries. You know, they've been banding for like 100 years. And back before you had satellite tracking technology, this was really the only way to see where individual birds went. And even though you can track them, that's expensive. So it's kind of cool just as what we're doing. I mean, most of what we're doing is a snapshot in time of who's here on this day and what condition are they in. But then you get this extra data, this recovery data. And the yellow dots are birds banded that we banded that other people have caught. You know, the ones I like the most were caught by other banders, so they're still alive. But a lot of them are like window kills, or somebody finds a bird dead, they notice a band on it, they report it to the banding lab, and we hear about it. We got all the way from Puerto Rico all the way up to I think that's Newfoundland. So that covers that whole. I showed you the Atlantic Flyway. I mean, our data really supports the concept of the Atlantic Flyway going through South Florida. Our closest and lamest recovery was a bird that we banded, and the next day it flew across the bay and like hit a window in Pinecrest. It was kind of sad. The banding lab was like, where's our data? And I said, we just banded it yesterday. Just cool your jets. And then the red dots are birds that other people banded that we've recaptured. And we've got a lot kind of in this area, the Northeast is a lot of our source birds. And then we've got, you know, painted buntings and stuff coming from the Carolinas. And then we had a wintering catbird in Cuba that we caught coming back north. And then notice there's another dot in Puerto Rico. This one, we had something that's really cool. And you think of how few birds are banded. The fact that this happened is kind of amazing. It's like a needle in a haystack situation. In 2013, we banded northern water thrush. In 2015, it was recaptured in Puerto Rico. They were doing a wintering bird study there. And they caught our birds. We thought, cool, it's our first record of a wintering of where birds go for winter, where we thought they went, but it's still cool to have the actual data. And then last fall, in 2020, I catch this Prairie Warbler, and it's got an old looking band. I figured it was one of ours returning to spend the winter, and I report the band, and banding lab is like, did you read it right? I said, yes. Okay, because your bird's 4 years old, which is old for, you know, it's pretty old, and was banded the same winter as the project that caught our northern water thrush. So in the same, you know, 2015, 2016 wintering bird study down there, they banded this prairie that then we catch 4 years later. So we basically traded birds with them, which I think is so cool. And the site was a Phobos, I'm not sure how to pronounce that right, Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve on the southern coast of Puerto Rico. And it's a mangrove, they're banding down in mangrove habitat, which is not surprising that they're catching prairies and northern water thrush because they love that stuff in the winter. And so our top 10 species are black-throated blue warblers, which are very abundant migrants around here. They're our top species that we banded, and we used to catch like 400, 500 in a season. We haven't had numbers that big for a while. It'd kind of be interesting to know why. These are going to the Caribbean islands. There's a few that spend the winter down here, but they're mostly passing through. But they're pretty. People that don't even know birds usually notice black-throated blue warblers because they're just pretty and they're everywhere, and they're usually down low, or even non-birders notice them. Our second bird is ovenbird. We probably catch even more ovenbirds if we could have our nets lower. We have to keep them pretty high because of cats and raccoons, and so ovenbirds walk around on the ground. They walk right under them, under our nets. Cape Florida is a great wintering place for ovenbirds. Most of our overwintering recaptures year after year are ovenbirds. It has less trouble with feral cats than most of the parks on the mainland. So it's a pretty good place for ovenbirds to live for years. And the third most abundant is American redstart, which has a wide range across the whole northern US and Canada. And then they kind of migrate to the east and come down. And widespread wintering range too. So there's just a lot of redstarts around. We actually have quite a few of them that spend the winter in Florida, while even more continue on to Central America and the islands. Then we get the gray catbird, which are all over in the winter. A lot of them are coming to South Florida to stay. People, you probably have them in your yards if you have any kind of fruit, anything fruiting, these will be around. They're closely related to mockingbirds. Black and white warbler is the one that likes to go up, creep up and down the tree trunks. And we always have, they have a very long migration. There's black and white warblers coming through South Florida or spending the winter every month except for maybe June and July. Actually, probably just June, because July they start migrating back. They're migrating early, they're migrating late. Some of them are going north in May, and then you see more coming south in July. So we catch a lot of them. And worm-eating warblers are one of my favorite. They're very feisty. These are mostly passing through completely to the Greater Antilles. They have a lot of character. They like to probe their beak in the rolled up dead leaves and pry them open. And then we catch common yellowthroats, quite a few of them. It's also a very widespread abundant bird all over the Americas. They're North America. They are multiple races of them. And some are migratory, some are year-round. We have them breeding in the Everglades all year, and then you get a whole bunch more coming down for the winter, and they like kind of scrubby habitat. And northern water thrush, most of them are moving through to points further south, but we do have quite a few spending the winter. They like water, ponds, edge of water and woods, like in a cypress forest or a mangrove habitat. You'll see these in the winter. And northern parula, small, really active bird. They're going, actually a lot of them do spend the winter here, and a lot are going further north-south. So they have a pretty widespread wintering range too. And red-eyed vireo. These completely move through. We don't have them here in the winter. They're our longest of all the birds we catch. They're going the farthest. They're going all the way down in the Amazon basin. And then there's some of our weird birds. We caught a sulfur-bellied flycatcher, which is in like southeast Arizona and Mexico. It's just this huge flycatcher. It's almost like a kingfisher or something. We caught, in the same year, 2005, we caught a thick-billed vireo, which is about like the first one banded on the US continent. And then we waited a long time and caught some more. And since 2017, we've caught 4 more. So that's a Caribbean species that is, I think it's getting a foothold in South Florida. I'm pretty sure they're breeding here because they're getting seen every year somewhere. And a lot of them are being seen in late summer with really, really juvenile plumage. So they may be breeding here in low numbers. Then we caught this mourning McGillivray's warbler hybrid. There are certain people in this county, I won't name names, who've never seen a mourning warbler, and they were like born and raised. And they're at this walk where we caught half of a mourning warbler. Mourning's the eastern, they're very similar birds, closely related. The eastern version is the mourning, the western version is the McGillivray's, and they meet there's like a hybrid zone in British Columbia. I learned all this doing research on this bird, going like, that's weird. In this one area of British Columbia, if you're there birding, you might run into birds you can't tell what they are. This bird had characteristics of both species, so I called it, that's I know it's a hybrid. And then we caught a Kiwis quail dove in 2018. This is a young male who's just starting to molt, and there's beautiful iridescent, the greens and the purple on him. He's still a little scruffy, but beautiful bird. And then this is the rarest bird we've caught. This is like the 5th North American record, not banding record, but it's like the 5th one ever in the entire north of the Mexican border. It's a very common bird in Central America and in the Greater Antilles, but it doesn't come north that much. But we had this girl, we banded her, and then she hung out for a couple of months. And we were kind of hush-hush because birders would have people wanting to check this on their life list would have invaded our banding station and ended our field season. So we had to keep this on the down low. And then when we were done, we're like, she's out there. Have fun finding her, because she was very shy. But that was the weirdest bird we've caught. And here's our results from spring. We banded 964 birds of 33 species. We were open 64 days between March 14th and May 16th. It was the slowest spring by measuring by birds by net hours, because we have more larger effort now, more net hours than in the beginning. So it's a way to really compare years. You have to pretty much divide the amount of birds, number of birds, by the number of nets you had up, how long you had them open. And it was a very slow spring. We did have one big day of 142 birds of 14 species banded on April 22nd, which is a great day for a good spring migration movement. The best that I could tell, large-scale easterly winds pushed the migrants west of the Florida Peninsula. It just like blew out of the east and southeast for like the whole spring. We'd have a whole lot of rain, a whole lot of fronts to make them land. And back then they had a national radar loop mosaic where I could actually watch. Birds were like going around the Gulf through Texas and Mexico and Texas and coming around that way, or maybe going from the Yucatan across. There wasn't a whole lot of action for us this spring. Oh well, we still caught some stuff. We caught one Connecticut Warbler. Usually in the spring we can catch a half dozen of them. That's a bird that's hard for birders to see. They it's very skulky, and the window that they pass through South Florida in any great numbers is short. It's like the first 2 weeks of May, and that's it. So we caught one. This morning warbler, though, and our aforementioned person that hasn't seen one of these was not around because he hasn't volunteered at the station. But this is a beautiful spring male who was all ready. He was probably the biggest surprise of this spring. Was like, what are you doing here? These in the spring, these guys are going around the edge of Texas, the other side of the Gulf through Texas up from Mexico. So this one guy was just off course. So we enjoyed him. And we only caught 9 blackpolls this spring. We usually catch like 70. Usually blackpolls invade South Florida in the spring, and any fruiting ficus is coated with blackpolls. This year they were just not around. I don't know where they went. They're fun to catch in the spring. A lot of birds have the same plumage in spring and fall, but blackpolls change. You know, you get that cap. And then indigo buntings, another species, is fun to see in the catch in the spring because they're blue, a lot bluer in the fall. They even the adults, they'll have blue wings, but their body feathers will be brown in the fall. So it's nice to see them in the spring with their blue coming in. And the species we didn't catch this spring, I always want to catch, is scarlet tanager. The adult males in the fall, they have jet black wings and tail, and they're green and yellow. And in the spring, they keep that jet black wing and tail, but then they have scarlet all over, but they glow. And we did not catch one this year, which was kind of a bummer. We don't catch a lot in spring. So fall 2021 results. Fall is a longer migration with more species. Because of the prevailing weather patterns in spring, a lot of birds go to Yucatan and jump across the Gulf. Like when I used to work on the Gulf Coast, we'd have our spring sites in like East Texas or West Louisiana. And we'd have our fall sites near like Gulf Shores, Alabama, Panhandle, Florida. Because in spring, they're going up to the east, to the west, and fall, all of them are more shifted to the east. And that benefits us in Florida, where we're very east, obviously. Fall migration is longer. In spring, it's kind of compact. It's like 6 weeks of intense migration. Fall, it's like 2.5 months. And you get more diversity. And so this fall, we were open 84 days from August 15th to November 7th. We only had one rain day. It was last Friday. There was absolutely nothing we could do with it except look at the radar and go back to sleep. Be glad it didn't like make us all drive up to Key Biscayne, open all the nets, and have it start raining at 8 o'clock like it's what it usually does.
We banded 170 birds of 52 species. We had, it was the Paris spring, the slowest fall we've ever had in 20 years. It tied with another year. 2010 was kind of a low volume year too, birds by net hours. So we usually are always hoping to like break the 2,000 mark. Like last year we caught, I think, 2,400 or close to it. And this year we only caught 1,770 with the same effort. But you get what you get. You're doing some weather dependent. We had one day of over 100. We caught 151 birds of 16 species on October 12th. That was our woohoo day. And the rest of the days, they kind of 40 birds, 50 birds, 30 birds. They just kind of trickled through. We just closed this weekend. I'm not really sure where the birds went this year. That nice radar mosaic that I used to watch them all, it's not running right now, so I can't like just look on the radar and see where they went. And it actually was kind of quiet, relatively slow all the way up the East Coast. My friend Robin in Athenston Migration was nothing like Athens, Georgia isn't a, you know, it's inland. It's not a migrant trap like the coast, but she still was like, she saw way more birds last year than this year. And there's a banding station in South Carolina that bands in the fall that I tracked there called Kiwis, that I tracked their progress, and it looked like they had lower numbers too. So I'm not really sure what happened this year. I'm sure it's probably weather related. We did have a lot of east winds also. It rained a lot, but not at the right time, like local rain. We didn't have, you know, we got a front sweep through last week, but it was too late. Nobody was migrating anymore. At least the long distance migrants were moved through. But we got highlights anyways. You know, you're out there, it's nice. We work with good people. We have a good time. You just see birds. And Canada Warbler is pretty rare. We caught one of those. I think we've only banded like 12 or 15 of them in 20 years. This ruby-crowned kinglet is an extremely common bird over like the rest of the US in winter. Other banding stations get slammed with these, but they just don't bother to come, especially now, you know, with it just getting warmer and staying warmer longer. These guys, if they come to South Florida, we all get excited, and it gets on the rare bird hotline. A tiny little bird. We also caught a whippoorwill. I think the 5th one we've caught in 20 years. It's like a small version of Chuck Will's widow. Caught an adult broad-winged hawk that was amazing, big handful. And then this Blackburnian warbler. He's only like the 10th black one of those we've ever caught. And this guy, we haven't caught one for like 5 years. And this guy showed up one afternoon on a pretty slow day, and he was in this they're usually in the tops of the trees. This guy was in low vegetation on one side of banding tent. He literally flew. That was you there that day, right? Yeah. Yeah. He buzzed you. I could feel his wind on his wings as he like below the tent, just threw it over there. And then he came back the other way, and I was just like, are you going to taunt us? So we finally ended up near a net down low, and we caught him on our closing run. It was like, yeah, you nerve of you to tease us like that. So that was kind of fun. We caught, of our top 3, we caught pretty similar numbers of all of them. You know, some years, you know, there'll be like 300 in one of the species, but this year they were all kind of the same. 278 ovenbirds, 274 black-throated blues, 235 American redstarts. And then this is just some fun pictures of where we are with time, of just the different, the diversity we have. This is a young broad-winged hawk. This is a white-crowned pigeon. And this is, yeah, these are all animated slides. This is probably the weirdest bird we catch, the Chuck Will's widow. Their mouth is about that big, and they can swallow warblers. They hunt at night. And it's like a big old Pac-Man head, for those of you old enough to remember Pac-Man. It looks like, when you look at this view, it looks like it has this tiny bill, but the mouth goes back to here, and then it opens up to this giant maw. And we once caught one that had half swallowed a northern water thrush. So it wasn't just trying to eat Prulas, the little warblers. It was like, ooh, 18 gram, northern water thrush. So that was amazing. And we haven't caught any for a while, but in the first few years when it was maybe a little bit more open, we caught ruby-throated hummingbirds. We don't have bans for them. You need a special permit to ban hummingbirds, but you can still, take the data on them. And I miss that we don't catch them anymore. I think we caught like 3 or 4 in the early years because they're adorable. And then we got birds with attitude. The great crested flycatcher has an amazing amount of attitude. They snap at you. I call them the castanet bird because they snap their bills. You can hear them in the woods. You're sitting there, it's quiet, and you just hear this big snap because there's a great crested flycatcher catching a bug somewhere. And then we have the crazy wide-eyed vireo. All these attitude birds seem to have fuzzy heads, and with their eyes, they look like lunatics. They're always nipping at you. And then we have blue jays, which I think are beautiful. They get overlooked. I think they're gorgeous, and they're the opposite. In the hand, they get really docile. It's like they're smart. They know that you kind of have the upper hand. They're like, if I make big eyes and look pathetic, you'll go easy on me, won't you? Where all the other birds are like fighting you the whole time. So. And then northern cardinals, that big orange beak hurts. They do chomp on your finger. And then we get non-warblers. We get thrushes. There's a wood thrush. We caught 3 of those this year. Surprisingly, we catch sometimes sparrows in the forest and grassland sparrows. We caught a couple of grasshopper sparrows. We caught a couple of seaside sparrows. They're just migrants flying around at night, and they just kind of drop down, and then they find, if they leave the woods, but have to reban them, they'll find some grass to be in. And then there's a summer tanager, which is gorgeous. It's blue. It's bright red all year. And red-bellied woodpecker. Caught a couple of those this year. They're nuts in the hand. Everybody's favorite yard bird, painted bunnings. And we catch that many rose-breasted grosbeaks. Most of them migrate in a different area. Not through Florida, but they also chomp. Look at that beak. And here's just more of our warblers. There's Blackburnian again. What's our time?
It is 7:20.
And we go until 7:30? Okay, let me speed it up. Here's the Cerulean warbler, which is our favorite bird. We've caught 10 of them. They're rare, they're beautiful. And little Wilson's warbler, a really common western species. We don't get that many. They're very cute. Here's some warblers that aren't our top species, but are more common. Predominantary warblers. We usually catch a few in August. Chestnut-sided. We only caught 1 this year, but some years we catch about half dozen. Swainson's warbler is a weird warbler. I think most of the population is moving through South Florida. They breed in the south, and then they winter in the greater Antilles. And the only place I've ever been, and banning all over the east, that we've caught a lot of Swainson's warblers is here. It's just a cool bird. They got a big old beak. They're on the ground. They like to flick, toss leaf litter aside. They look like a blackbird or something. And hooded warbler is another bird we usually catch maybe 5 to 10 of a year. It's just another beautiful. Good to see yellow. And here's golden wing, another crowd pleaser. Blue wing is closely related. We usually catch a couple of these a year. We didn't catch either species this year. We caught a golden wing in spring, but we didn't catch either of those in the fall. We usually catch blue wing, so it's kind of a miss. And then yellow-throated warbler. That's a common wintering warbler. They like palms, and you usually only see like 1 yellow-throated warbler at a time. The other species flock, but yellow, it's like there's only room in this flock for me. And that's it for the birds. Just a little quick, I probably won't get into this because we're running out of time, but we are trying to start a new partnership with Tropical Audubon, Cape Florida Banding Station, and Biscayne Nature Center to set up a banding station design for education, using that they've got the infrastructure to have schools, like all Dade County schools, come out there for field trips. We're trying to design and implement a curriculum about bird ecology and have
10 nets or something near the station, near their center, to show young kids live wild birds in the hand, hopefully get some of them hooked on conservation. That will, COVID is kind of slowing that down, but we're trying to get the permits together this winter. So hopefully sometime, if not in time for spring, hopefully we'll be ready to do that in fall. And that's pretty much it. You can read about us at Tropical Audubon Society's new website. There's a link to my blog, but they also post the blog posts there, blog posts there. There's information who to get in touch with, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much.
So, and I guess it's
That's not to look at.
okay.
Um,
Okay. Oh,
This is the question that most people ask, and I still am confused about. Do birds sleep through migration? Since you said they fly at night and they hear the daytime.
do birds? She's asking, do birds sleep in migration? Yes. They actually, I think studies have found that birds that are crossing, they're doing long overwater flights, half sleep, like literally half their brain goes to sleep while the other half stays awake. So they keep flapping, and I think they switch sides, which is nuts. Also, these birds that are stopping and feeding during the day, they get quiet during the heat of the day, so they probably nap. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they nap.
Why is the spring migration so much shorter than fall?
In time, because it's kind of the play between, if they get up there too soon, their habitat's not ready, there can be severe weather, like a late snow or something. There's a, they're both in a rush to get there first. For the male birds in spring migrate before the females. The females will wait for a little bit better weather, like come through in May, but the males are in a rush to get the best territory. If they go too soon, there could be late snow and they might die. So they kind of have this, and it just, these two different forces acting on each other compress the migration down. And in fall, you have young birds in fall. You have adults that know the route. You have young birds that know instinctively, I have to go there, but they don't know the route yet. You know, so they're learning and they go weird places and lollygaggle. There's some species we'll see more adults in like August. And also each species has its own kind of window of migration. You know, there's some birds move through in August, others move through in October. So yeah, it's just the different pressures on it. The different ecological or evolutionary processes are acting on fall versus spring. So you end up with a very short period, short intense spring migration and a drawn out fall.
What's your favorite bird?
Oh, people always ask me that, and I kind of want to say, what am I holding at any given? What am I looking at? I love warblers. I love the migratory warblers. But I also love seabirds. You know, it's just, you know, I've loved birds since I was born, and different birds have captured my attention. But I've often find myself stuck on seabirds and stuck on warblers, small songbirds.
This is the people listening. What type of, who funds the banding station and how it counts?
The banding station right now, we are entirely funded by donations. She asked me who funds us. The old days were funded by my savings, my student loan, working for people. My old job allowed me to, so it's a weird story, but for a long time I had a job that paid me year round. I had a very intense field season and they gave me the time to band. Now, because I was running out of money, I'm already going to retire in a van down by the river because this banding station. We're now, as part of our partnership with Tropical Audubon, are fundraising through them. We got a grant from the Bachelor Foundation. We did an Adopt-A-Net fundraising this fall.
So we're just, looking for grants just from institutions that are willing to fund us and individuals. If anybody's interested in donating, there's a donor button on the Tropical Audubon. And I think right now it's set up to, you kind of have to write in for the banning station, but 100% of your donation will go to banning station operations and equipment and, whatever we need to do to keep it going.
Are there any volunteer opportunities?
There are, and the next volunteer round will be for spring. And contact me. You can go to Tropical Audubon's website and find contact info for me. We'll start in middle of March, so contact me in late February, early March. It is a big commitment. We ask 1 day a week, at least. So we're open 7 days a week. It's sunrise to about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And we need to have you there 1 day a week because it takes so much time to train you properly. It's not something you can just walk up and learn in 1 day. If you don't have that time and you're interested in visiting us in the spring, same, contact me. We probably will have visitors again. You just kind of get with us in advance and say, I'd like to visit on such and such day. So we'll make sure that we have enough people there, and we'll probably do some Tropical Audubon Society walks and visit the banning station. They'll often do a loop. They'll do Cape Florida and then come by the banning station, see what we're catching. We'll bring birds out to show you. So, but yeah, if you're interested in volunteering, you have the time, the best thing to do is come out and visit for a day, see if it's something you want to do in the first place, and then we can go from there for scheduling. We are always looking for weekday volunteers. A lot of people have a Monday, Friday schedule, so we usually do pretty good for weekends. But we're always looking for people that have a weird schedule and are available during the week.
Is there an age minimum?
Like 12-year-olds, it would depend on the kid. It's kind of a case by case because, really young kids don't have the, they're good. They learn so quick, but they don't have the focus. So it probably have to be based on the kid, but probably below 12 is kind of young for it. But if a parent wanted to be a volunteer and have their kid, I mean, that's how Lucas and Nico learned, because their dad brought them out to the station for years, and they grew up doing it, and we're very good at it. Cool. Is that it?
Thank you so much.